Good day. We're St. Andrew United Methodist, where we're welcoming all into Christ as the center, love as the answer, and serving as the mission. We're thrilled that you've joined us for worship today. So, would you take a moment and quiet your hearts and get ready to worship the Lord?
Greetings from your hand fall on us. Lord, let your grace, greetings from your hand fall on us, that we may be saved, that we may have light to shine our way in the darkest night. Let your grace come over us. Oh Lord, let your love with God come over us. Oh Lord, let your love with God come over us, that we may be saved, that we may have light to shine our way in the darkest night. Let your love come over us. Let your light shine on us.
Hi, my name is Sam Jones. I'm the director of the Methodist Youth Fellowship at St. Andrew's United Methodist Church in Toms River. The kids of MYF, plus our 5th to 8th graders in Yes, are sponsoring a food drive for the St. Andrew Food Pantry, and they'd like to tell you about it.
Hi, I'm Russ. According to Patch on December 3rd, 2020, hunger is an urgent problem for about 85,000 people in Ocean County. By the end of the year, our pantry at St. Andrews served more families than ever, including the 60 Thanksgiving baskets distributed.
Hi, I'm Izzy. How can we see Jesus? He told us one way in Matthew 25, verse 35. For when I was hungry, you gave me food. When we help some of our hungry neighbors, we see the face of Jesus.
Hi, I'm Maddie. After Christmas every year, donations to food banks and food pantries drop in January and February. This year, food donations are needed more than ever. COVID has made the problem of food insecurity much worse this year.
Hi, I'm Josh. Jesus told us to love our neighbors. 84,498 of our neighbors are hungry. Please help us to love our neighbors and feed them.
Hi, I'm Evan. We will be collecting food after each church service from January 17th to February 14th. We will also have a drop-off day, 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, on Saturday, February 13th. If you would like to donate a check or a gift card, we will buy the food for you.
Hi, I'm Eric. 11.3% of children under 18 in New Jersey were hungry in 2018. That number had fallen from 21.8% in 2010. COVID, however, has made it worse. Please help us feed our friends and neighbors.
So there you have it. Our neighbors need help. Remember, the MYF Yes Food Drive will be from January 17th through February 14th. We'll have a drop-off day at St. Andrew, 1528 Church Road, Toms River, on February 13th if you'd like to drop off your food between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. All food, cash, checks, or gift cards will be used exclusively for the St. Andrew Food Pantry. Thank you in advance for your generosity. May God bless you and the neighbors that we serve. Peace.
Recently, a friend of mine sent me an email miscommunication. A New Jersey couple decided to go to Florida during a particularly icy winter. They planned to stay at the same hotel that they had spent their honeymoon on 20 years previously. Because of their hectic schedules, it was difficult to coordinate them both traveling at the same time. So the husband left out of Newark on a Thursday to head to Florida, and then the wife followed suit the next day. When the husband checked into the hotel, there was a computer in his room, so he decided to be sweet and email his wife. However, he accidentally left out one of the letters in his wife's email address. He didn't catch his error, so he sent the email to someone else without even realizing. Meanwhile, somewhere in Pennsylvania, a widow had just returned home from her husband's funeral. He was a minister who had just died previously of a heart attack. Expecting messages from parishioners and friends and families, she checked her email. But after reading the first message, she screamed and fainted to the floor. Her son came rushing in, and what he found when he looked at his mom's laptop saw this. 2, my loving wife. Subject, I've arrived. I know you're surprised to hear from me. They have computers here now, and you are allowed to send emails to your loved ones. I've just arrived and checked in. I see that everything has been prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you then. Hope your journey is as uneventful as mine was. P.S. Sure is hot down here. Jim. Now, though we find this story funny, and it is in its own right, I'm sure the widow did not find this humorous. In fact, death and grief are not often associated with humor or hope at all. Yet today, we will see how grief is accompanied with hope. Our scripture passage is taken from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 13 and 21, and then skipping down to 28 through 35. Hear now the words of the Lord. Now on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place." And skipping down to verse 28, as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us. It's almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 there, companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. During this global pandemic, we are intensely more aware of death and the grief that follows after a loved one or friend has passed away. Grief can put binders over one's eyes and even entirely overtake a person. Loved ones try and keep the deceased's memory alive by sharing pictures and videos of time spent together. or by telling stories about what he or she did and said, perhaps recalling the countless ways the person made them laugh. This recounting of memories and the reliving of the stories is what I picture here at the beginning of today's gospel. These people who had seen Jesus crucified are walking down a long road from Jerusalem to Emmaus, filled with grief. They've experienced something traumatic together, something they cannot process without turning to each other and talking about it. There are many surprising things in this story, but I'm never surprised to hear that these travelers are, as the gospel says, talking with each other about all the things that had happened. Of course they were. That's how we begin to make sense of what is senseless, is to talk about it, to share the story. This story takes place later in the day on that first Easter. We don't know why Cleopas and his friend were traveling on the road. Perhaps they're afraid, like the disciples were the week previous, afraid of the violence and the persecution that would befall them now that Jesus of Nazareth was dead. Cleopas and his friend are walking and talking, and then Jesus is walking and talking with them. Yet they don't realize that it's Jesus at this point. It's unclear why that they don't realize it's Jesus. However, in verse 16 it says, their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Were their eyes clouded by grief? Did Jesus somehow look differently to them in their sorrow? We don't know. But in this moment, they do not know who Jesus is. It's in this delicious bit of irony that they tease this stranger about how clueless he is. They're shocked that this person doesn't know what's happened lately, doesn't know who Jesus was and how he was crucified. Their friend. Jesus plays along, pretending that he has no idea and asks, "What things?" When, of course, no one knows better what things than Jesus. The most painful moment in this story for me comes in verse 21, when Cleopas and his friend's response about Jesus. He says, "But we had hoped that he was the one to set Israel free." Had hoped. So much grief contained in those two words. Had hoped. They saw Jesus turn the ways of the world upside down through his miracles and through his workings. All of the possibilities and dreams and freedom that Jesus had offered were gone, or so they thought. We know something these days about had hoped. We all had hoped to be with our families at Christmas. We had hoped to be able to go on that trip abroad. We had hoped to hug our grandma or grandpa on their birthday. We had hoped to be there to say goodbye to our father or sister in the hospital. We had hoped to gather the whole family together to attend the funeral. We had hoped to meet that new grandbaby when it was born. We had hoped to have the wedding in the spring. We had hoped, had hoped, had hoped. What does Jesus do for these broken-hearted friends walking down the road? First, he walks with them. He walks with them and talks with them, and he meets them on the dusty road, right where they are. They do not need to go to him. He comes to them. He listens and allows them to tell their story, to share their memories of Jesus of Nazareth. He could have corrected them immediately. He could have set them straight and told them who exactly he was. But there's something important about letting a grieving person share their story and tell how they are grieving. Reverend Anna Carter Florence posits that grief is the road we all have to walk sooner or later. We walk it again and again. When we aren't walking it ourselves, we fall into step with someone else who is taking their turn. So maybe we learn from Jesus to invite each other to share their stories and to listen to each other as we share them ourselves. Jesus also helps these friends see that their story is part of a much greater story, God's story, as told in the scriptures. He opens that story to them in a new way, a way they truly don't realizing it until much later. We too are part of that much bigger story, a story that in spite of all its surprises along the way, no matter how many joys or heartbreaks it contains, always ends with resurrection. There is always a hope on the horizon, an eternal hope that rests completely in God, a hope that surpasses death. The last thing that Jesus does for these friends is join them for a meal, a simple meal, around the table where they offer him some bread. It is in that simple, everyday moment that they finally realize who he is. He breaks the bread, and their eyes are opened. It makes me wonder where we might be on the lookout for Jesus among us now, where he's showing up, and how might our eyes be open to see him, the Son of God. I love hearing and seeing those stories of hospitals playing special songs over the loudspeakers whenever a COVID-19 patient gets released or discharged. Often those speakers are used to announce codes or summon crisis teams. But in these happier moments, the medical staff gather to cheer and applaud as the patient is wheeled out to meet their family in celebration. It's a way to remind those patients to stop and celebrate, to have hope in midst of so much despair. Those patients are leaving the hospital with a long journey ahead, but they have life and they have hope. The song that seems to be played most often in these celebrations is a personal favorite, The Beatles' Here Comes the Sun, from their 1969 masterpiece, Abbey Road. In his 1980 biography, I, Me, Mine, George Harrison describes how he was supposed to go to a meeting with the accountants from Apple Records when he decided to do something instead. It seems as if winter in England goes on forever. By the time spring comes, you really deserve it. So one day I decided I was going to sag off Apple, and I went over to Eric Clapton's house. The relief of not having to go to all those dopey accountants was wonderful. And I walked around the garden with one of Eric's acoustic guitars and wrote, "Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say it's all right." Some consider this song rather lightweight. Perhaps. But it's not lightweight for those who have experienced the long, coldly winter, or suffering on a respirator, or the empty dinner seat reminders of those we miss who have died. For those in such places, knowing that the sun is coming out and that it'll all be all right is a world of hope. Here comes the sun, and here comes the Son, the Son of God, showing up in all kinds of places maybe we don't even recognize at first, including our own tables. So I ask, how might we see Jesus in each other? And even more so, how might we be the hands and feet of Jesus for each other?
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, It seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Little darling, the smiles returning to their faces. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Darling, I feel the ice that's slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. It's alright.
And now may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine upon you, and be gracious unto you, and give you peace. Amen.